Good evening. I'm Crimson from Shine a Light in the Dark, and I am here with the amazing Nathan. And he has been so nice to join us this evening and give us a little moonlight. So, Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. I was looking at some of your TikToks and stuff earlier, and really like I know that hate yourself has been like, or hate myself has been like a really big blow up. Like, how did you even write that? Like, I love the lyrics. It's lyrically beautiful and you can feel your pain when you're singing it.
Yeah. I wrote "Hate Yourself" back about a year ago now, so it's kind of an older song. But I feel like I sort of found my voice in that song. I was really inspired by the last serious relationship that I had been in, and I was with them for 2 years, and it just didn't really work out. And I feel like a part of it was from her, but it was a part of it from me as well. And so that song was kind of wrote in the expression of dealing with an abusive relationship, or a relationship that was kind of just toxic for one another.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And I heard you say that it's even where you found your voice. How did you go about challenging yourself to find your voice?
I think I I've always been a producer, and I started producing when I was 18. Um, I was just had always loved making music. I kind of always had a natural ear for it,
Yeah.
and really when I was young, I would be like in high school, and I would like play the piano in my downtime at school, and would pick up guitar, and I kind of was learning how to understand how notes and scales and sort of how to create a song over time. And the last thing that came for me was singing, and I didn't really know like what I wanted to sound like or how I should sound like. I knew vocalists that like really inspired me. And but I never felt like I quite had the ability to. So a lot of like my older music like goes back, to about 8 years ago. So some of it's quite a long time ago. When I just started releasing stuff that I was making by myself at home. And I started like more in a pop sort of EDM direction. A lot of it was really poppy and electronic. And as I kind of kept moving up, I was trying to kind of match my voice to the things that inspired me growing up. I was really inspired by Linkin Park growing up. Chester and was like a big vocal influence for me, and same thing with Bring Me the Horizon. So I loved both of those influences of vocalists, and but I felt like with Hate Yourself, I was finally able to combine sort of the elements that are being used today in music, like utilizing like trap and pop music, but also into rock, and being able to utilize that and do that with my voice. But it took a while, and I feel like people resonate with Hate Yourself because of its meaning and its message behind it. I took a long time with the lyrics. Um, and I think that's why right now it's just been doing so well. And I've been just constantly promoting it for the entire year since it's been released.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And just like as you were saying that we were talking about promoting it on TikTok, like as I scroll and I see it, like there's just like this massive amount of power that like screams through my screen the second your video comes on and I just see you kind of like running like, with the
Yeah,
white shirt and the blood and it just like and just like the screaming is just like it like gets that part, that core of your soul that like actually feels like it can release those emotions, right? Because a lot of times I think a lot of us are feeling that way, but we don't even know a safe way or a way to express it. I've
yeah,
often said that music is like another person because it's something that's there with you in the darkest moments of your life. And it's one of the only things that sometimes understands you. And then to watch like even your TikTok videos and to listen to the song, you very colorfully paint the world through your lyrics so that the listener can go join that world with you. How do you kind of go about getting yourself into that world to write?
A lot of how I've it's funny because I don't really I say it took a long time on the lyrics, but I don't write though. Like kind of what I do is I have to feel really inspired to make a song.
Okay.
And for me, the best songs that I've made so far very much just come from me not forcing it. And I'll just go on the mic and I'll just start singing different words and different things until I find what I'm looking for to say. And when I spent a lot of time on Hate Yourself, I kept re recording those verses. And I kept kind of trying to find the different metaphors that I wanted to for in that song. Um, but growing up, it was kind of always just really cathartic for me to. I didn't really have any other way to express myself. I wasn't really big into sports. I played a lot of hockey, being from New York. Um, but I would just try to, when I could, just play music and sing and making my own music. Um, but it's always sort of just made me feel better when I feel down, when I feel kind of lost or I feel depressed, um, or a certain situation or something's bugging me. Like I have a lot of music too that's just really like ignorant as well. Like that's a side of me where I'm just kind of like pissed off at everybody. And Hate Yourself was this feeling of like I felt very much suffocated in the relationship I was in. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of, and I feel like everyone can relate to that. And like I've seen comments on TikTok from, people that it, they may relate it to the person they were with, they may relate it to a family member, they may relate it to a friend. Um, and I tried to kind of keep it ambiguous in that way to where it could relate to multiple situations for people. But in that moment, I felt kind of like hopeless because I'd spent, and in 2 years is not terribly long. Some people are with each other for a longer time and it doesn't work out. But I was with this person for a very long time and I still genuinely love and care about them and I just want them to be happy moving forward. I feel like it was both best for us to move on from each other.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know if she's heard the song, but I know I think she would definitely connect and say that that's about her. But um, at the end of the day, though, I made peace with it, and I think that's the hardest part is to be able just to make peace with it, for anybody. Um, in a relationship with somebody, it's easier to walk away, and a lot of times, what a lot of the comments say is they relate it to their parent because they kind of can't get away from their mom or their dad. That just is very toxic to them and puts a lot on them, puts a lot of pressure on them to be something that they're not. Um, but it's been wild. I just started slam posting that song since last year, just posting it 3 times a day and trying to make good content. And sometimes because I'm so busy, I can't. So I would just some of it's just literally me looking in the camera and doing fucking nothing, like nothing crazy or anything, but the I've been trying to up the image and trying to put more effort into the TikToks. So like these last videos I've done with the white dress shirt and the blood and having my friend record me while I'm out lip syncing it, I think creates that image more, for people to kind of latch on to the feeling of what the song is about.
Yeah. No, no, I completely agree with that. Like, I'm one of those people that I feel like when I listen to music, if I don't feel the person singing the music, I have a hard time listening to it. Like, it's almost like if somebody else wrote their
Yeah,
lyrics, there's almost like this disconnect between like the soul and the music, but like when you can actually feel that, like, no, like that's completely like that's connected, like that's them, like raw. And when I see your video, and like especially like I don't know what it is about, like when you like first like bow down and you just kind of like give that kind of like that charge up to me, like I don't know, I just feel like that pain, but I also it's so inspiring to me because I also feel that power there. Like it's like, okay, this pain was here, but I'm also like trying to take back my power. Like I'm still like kind of moving forward, and I'm not allowing this to kind of suffocate me. And another thing I really love about it is, like you said, it's so ambiguous that it can be used in multiple situations, whether it's like talking about a friend or a family member. Like I was able to relate it to several people in my life that I have felt like have literally tried to make me, that the abuse was real, and they've made me this big, and so I think that that's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I also think that just like um the way that you charged about it is really beautiful. And I also think it's really cool that because it just seems like you in that video. Like I don't know why. Like I just feel like that video is so authentic. If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've all I, depending on the song and the mood of the song, like I feel like I've always liked balance in songwriting, and it always depends on the song. Like a lot of like I know you really like Motionless in White from what you were saying, and and Chris, even some of their newer music and the way that they're going about it and writing it, a lot of it is very balanced in the way that the energy feels towards the emotions of the song. And Hate Yourself, like the verses are kind of chill and they're darker, and it's just me singing softly. And I feel like in a relationship at some point you just want to outburst, and that was kind of the feeling I was trying to get for the chorus was, the that emotion just to express. And I agree, I'm the same way about just really feeling the music, and a vocalist that can really express themselves. And I feel like that's why still rock music is doing so well right now, and it's getting even bigger now. Um, just all the new stuff that's coming out is inspiring. I get compared to Bad Omens a lot,
Oh, I could.
um, and I love Bad Omens. I think they're just unbelievably talented. So all the new music I'm currently working on, I'm trying to take my time and reach that level of just quality, and the songwriting is just as good because I feel like there's so much competition now. Um, and that the new Bad Omens album is amazing. Um, the new Motionless in White record is amazing. So all this new stuff that's coming out is just really, really fucking good. And I feel like if I need to separate myself from Bad Omens or Bring Me the Horizon is the other one I get a lot, I need to kind of separate myself in a way that makes me have more of an identity, I guess. Um, but that's hard to do as a musician. It's really difficult, but it takes time. What inspired you to get into counseling and being a therapist?
Oh, so my childhood really is what. So I grew up in and out of foster care, and my mother was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So she would frequently lose custody
Mm,
of me, and I get put into foster care. And because of that, I went through a lot of dark places, and so I pretty much had to teach myself everything myself. And I remember just like always being alone, and you know always trying to figure out everything for myself. And I never wanted anybody else to have to do that for themselves. I wanted them to be able to, I wanted to be that torch that was like, hey, like, I know this sucks and I know it's hard, but like, I can help. Like, I wanted to try to inspire them and show them like that there is somebody still there. I guess it's my way of giving the love that I never felt like I received, or the guidance that I never felt like I received, if that makes any
yeah,
sense at all.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's inspiring because I think with what you do, being a therapist can be very difficult because you have a lot of you're really listening to a lot of people's trauma and just having to deal with your own, and I think it takes a lot to be able to go into a field like that. Um, and like what I've told you too is right now I'm going to cosmetology school and being a bartender, and
Yeah.
I can understand that to a point, you know. So it's a lot for sure.
Yeah, no. By the way, thank you. Thank you for asking that. And I think that as a cosmetologist and even like as a bartender, y'all kind of get the brunt end of people sometimes too. Not like the like in a bad way, but like they're very emotional in those spaces, and those are very close, like personal spaces, that takes a lot of relatability and a lot of time to like recharge because they are so vulnerable at times. And so how has that kind of been? Like, because I know that you kind of like
It's
you've kind of working and mixing fields. How has that been?
it's been very very interesting. I mean, um, I had a lot of trauma from my mom too, so I can understand and relate to you on that. My mom was very um so I pretty she was a nurse practitioner, and I grew up with her. Um, Most of my childhood, I didn't know my dad. Never really met him or anything. Um, he was around till I was about 3 or 4, and then he had left. And my mom was very much a narcissistic person. She constantly would lie about things. Like she lied to me about my birthday, like when my birthday actually was. She would lie to me about just the weirdest stuff. And so growing up with her, she wasn't very fond of me just as a child or as a kid, and didn't really care too much about me. So I can understand like that trauma and abandonment. When I was I was never good in school. Like I was never good in middle school, high school, grade school. I always felt stupid. Like being around people always kind of bothered me. I always felt sort of outcasted in a way. Um, and I don't necessarily know why, because it wasn't ever, I feel like, not me trying to be friendly. But the school system I also grew up in, like I went to a pretty bad school. It was a rough area of the city and the town. And so I would get in fights a lot. People were always doing some shit and, causing a lot of drama. Um, in my freshman year of high school, I was getting picked on by this kid in gym class, and he would always pick on me every single day. And I ended up taking a bat to him, and I hit him across the head. And he went completely down, completely out, and kept hitting him. And unfortunately, I had paralyzed him. So the school had filed charges, and my mom basically after that was just like, "Oh, you're a failure. You're a terrible kid." Basically gave up and kind of abandoned me and didn't want to have anything to do with me. Just thought I was, just a total wreck. And at the time, I was. So um, I had to do 8 months in juvenile detention center, but I couldn't go back to the school that I was going at. The school system, the school I had expelled me, and none of the other schools would let me go back in. And the family had pressed charges. So I had to do about 150 hours of probation once I got out, and I did the 8 months. And as much as it all had like really, really sucked and it was bad, I'm kind of glad it happened because I felt like within that time I had to be in the detention center. I sort of found myself, and it was in a way of like I was removed from the school, um, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really know what my purpose was. My mom was like, "Nah, fuck you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. You're a piece of shit kid." I paralyzed that poor dude, and I never meant to. He just it was just an off the wall thing, and but I felt like within that time I got my GED while I was there, and I was able to find myself. And when I got out, I went and got a job. Um, my grandparents had bought me my first car, so I was able to go and get my license, and I started just working and got into producing because I was like, okay, well, I'm good at music. And so I got myself a computer, kept producing stuff and producing music, and so from there on forth, that's sort of what projected me upwards, and I got better at producing, but being a bartender was really the first thing that started making me any kind of money. And I always tell this to anyone that's young: go into serving, go into bartending, like because it's a good way of making fast cash. But when I had gotten out and had my GED, all I was doing was working fast food, and I'd work at Subway or Taco Bell, and I did that for about a year, and I wasn't making any money at all.
You know,
Um,
I think that you were just like totally speaking to my soul right now because, you know, number one, bullying is like one of those things that's just absolutely horrible. And I wanted to say that I can't even begin to express how thankful I am that you were so vulnerable um and you shared that because I actually one of the things that always made me feel stupid was as I was in juvie and in and out of foster care so much that I never got an actual like full education as a child. So when I went back to school, it made me feel some type of way about myself. But what was so weird when I was listening to your story is I had a very similar story with my mother. I came home one night and she was really drunk and her boyfriend like tried to touch my leg, so I slapped him and I like tried to kick him out of the house. Well, that night I remember that she beat me so bad that my white outfit was completely red. And I had always been a runner, so normally I would run out of the house to like get away from her. But this one particular house, we only had one door. And that night she was like, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna finally kill you." And she gets a hammer and she's standing in front of the door, and I'm like, "Dude, just move, just please move." And she wouldn't move. And so, by God's good graces, when she went to swing the hammer at my head, I caught it. But because I caught it, I then had the hammer in my hand. And then when she charged at me, I forgot I had the hammer in my hand. And so I actually ended up cracking her skull. And I was almost 11 when that happened. And I'll never forget because after she recovered and after I was in PYC for a while, I met with my mother before I went to see the judge, and she was like, "Hey, I've been in so much trouble. If you just say it was all your fault, they'll just slap you on the wrist and you'll get away with it, like, and nothing will happen to you." And I was
yeah.
so young that she was still my mom, so I listened. And so I pled guilty to, at the time, um, first degree attempted murder. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
even really realize what I was saying. By God's good graces, though, the judge was like, I'm not like pulled me because he was looking at the picture of like how beaten I was afterwards. He's like, that can't be like I'm looking at this and this just doesn't align. Like, are you sure you want to say you did this? And he ended up knocking it down to assault, like the lowest assault, because he was like, I
Good.
refuse to charge this 10-year-old with this when I also see that she's been in and out of foster care due to abuse and all these other things. And then because the thing that was weird is I wasn't even supposed to have been with my mother. She actually didn't have custody of me at the time. And there was a restraining order against the two of us. But because it was so close to the holidays, I was trying to visit her for I think it was for Christmas. Yeah, it was for Christmas. But
Yeah.
And so I just want to say that I totally feel your pain in that, because it's like when this person that, has really done some horrible things to you and made you feel like really horrible about yourself. It's like you don't mean,
Hmm.
like, to this day, I don't actually remember hitting her with that hammer. I didn't even, like, I remember swinging my hand to make her get out of the way, but I didn't remember that I had caught the hammer and it was in my hand. And I do
Yeah.
remember though
Yeah.
looking back as she fell to the floor, and I remember throwing the hammer like, oh my gosh. And then when I tell you I ran as fast as I could, like I ran out the door like I originally wanted to. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to relate to that and say that I am so thank you so much for sharing your story, because it's beautiful, and I just wanted to tell you that I can relate to that and you're not alone. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, and I'm sorry, that it all happened to you, because it's, especially being in the foster system, I didn't have to deal with that. And, um, yeah, I don't really, my mom definitely had, even with my family here currently where I'm at, like, everyone kind of knew my mom had some major issues. And she did. She was into drugs. She was a narcissist, constantly lying, constantly manipulating. And I don't know if she. Um, it's just weird, One moment you're growing up as a kid and you think your mom loves you, and and then she's just treating you like shit all of a sudden. She would be so back and forth, and then she would lie to you about your own birthday. I thought my birthday was a whole different date for years of my life. She would just do shit like that. I I think and with the kid that I'd hurt in school too, I feel bad about that. Like, because I never wanted to pay. I mean, that guy's paralyzed for life.
Yeah.
And I understood why the parents pressed charges. Not just to me, but to the school, everything. Like, it was a fucking terrible ordeal. It was a complete
How old were
mess, and
you?
I was terrified. Um, I was 16, so I was 16, and I didn't get out until I was 17.
Okay.
Um, but at the time, yeah, I was terrified. Um, so it was, and I feel bad, and I've tried to do my best to make peace about what had happened. And and being a kid, it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more harder. And parents are so hard on their kids. And them just growing up, like, and especially in situations like you did or I did, people don't really understand, like, the reality of the real world in those scenarios. And for kids that are that age and growing up, like, I grew up being fucking bullied all the time, and eventually something's gonna happen. Some kid's
Yeah.
gonna do something. Someone's gonna snap. Someone's gonna hurt someone, and that's exactly what I did. And and I hope whatever happened to him, he's okay. And my mom had passed away, so she eventually had passed away. But I made peace with it. I realized that she just wasn't meant to be a mom. But I don't think she really had held full animosity towards me. I just don't think she was ever meant to be a mother. And she had a lot of her own mental things that she had to deal with and to go through. Um, but yeah, it's hard. I'm very sorry to hear that you had gone through that as well. It's difficult. It's very difficult, and as I've gotten older, I've made more and more peace about it. But because my mom wouldn't let me stay with her at the house, I lived in my car for like almost a year, and I just worked fast food. I worked at Subway and Taco Bell, and I just worked and I worked and worked for a long time. And I was just living in my car, and this was upstate New York, so the winters were fucking freezing. and I was just making by because I was just trying to save as much money as I could to get by. And right around that time is when I knew a friend that became a server at Red Lobster, and he was making really good money. And so he's like, "Hey, if you want, I can get you in." And I was like, "Okay." Like, I mean, I've never done serving, but I'll try. And got into there, was serving, making way, way more money than I was doing fast food. So I was like, "Okay, well, I'll just stick to this." And around that time is finally when I got an apartment and eventually got into bartending, and I kept bartending at a bunch of different restaurants. Um, and around that time, I was always just working on music producing at FL Studios and Logic, and I just kept like practicing and practicing and making beats and recording other people in my downtime and free time and making money from that. Um, and eventually, I got into connections with another producer named Justin Spalding, um, and he sort of mentored me as a producer because he was a bigger producer than me.
Hmm.
Probably still to this day, I think the most talented guy that. And me and him still talk, and we're working on my new music together now that everything's been really successful. Um, but he's taught me a lot about producing and recording, and got me into connections with these other people in the industry as well that he had known. And so I've it's good though. It's important to me. I've always tried to surround my life with things that doesn't feel like work. If that makes sense, it's not that it can't exhaust you. Like I'd feel like being a therapist can be exhausting when you're listening to people all day. But being a cosmetologist can be exhausting, or producing can be exhausting. Anything can burn you out over time. But I always loved serving and bartending. I always loved making music, and then cosmetology was the next thing that I found out I was pretty good at, and
Yeah.
decided to go. Um, and I tried to balance all of those things at once. In between, when I start to feel like I get a little burnt out on one thing, I go to the next thing, and then I go on to the next thing. And I've always tried to live my life that way. I've never been a kind of person where it's like I don't need to make the most money in the world to be happy. I just want what I'm doing day to day to make me happy. Um, and I think that's good though that you decided to do that, because a lot of people need more than ever um, somebody to listen to them and somebody to give them advice and somebody to help them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, I used to think that my past disqualified me, but I realized as a counselor, it was actually the very thing that qualified me. So it allowed me to not be afraid of dark places. Like, I have no problem going into the pits of any kind of darkness with people. I've lived there my entire life. So I have no problem with it. And I also just wanted to say that I'm sorry to you too for the trials that you went through and the struggles that you went through as a child, because but I also, wanted to say just how badass I think you are for how much you've overcome that, and how that doesn't show on you. And that's a big feat in itself, because and I always hear people talk about like anger music, like why you shouldn't listen to anger music, but believe it or not, angry music is really important. Like as a therapist, like because the first time I realize I'm angry, that means I realize that something was stolen or robbed from me. It tells me there was an injustice served against me, and so my anger is actually a warning bell going off, like, hey, like there's something up here. And so I think it's beautiful that you know, you've used it in a way that's number one, productive, right? Like through writing your music and also even healing. But I also think it's beautiful that you didn't allow it to keep you caged in your shell to where you never came out. And it sounds like you still even love people, because you said you love bartending, you love cosmetology. Like those are people things. So it didn't even make you, because our parents are the top thing, right? And if our parents are really flighty and wishy-washy, it trains our brains to react in certain ways. Like I for the longest time had an anxious attachment because I never knew what I was fixing to get. Like I had to always be on pins and needles, and and I was kind of even hearing that a little bit like with you. And so I think it's beautiful how much you've overcome and just how strong you are. And I guess I just really wanted to express, just gratitude for you even sharing that. And then also too just gratitude for you putting your music and your heart out there.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I'm 27 now, but like back then, this was when I was 18, 19. It still wasn't easy. I mean, I was doing drugs. I was getting fucked up almost every other day going through this. So it wasn't always the smoothest process.
Oh
I
yeah.
think everyone's going to go through some hell for sure. I think eventually I got to the point like I was just realizing that the things I was doing, because it wasn't that I wasn't trying to better myself, but I didn't have good habits. I had very, very self-destructive habits. I still have to watch myself. Um, and I have to learn, like, okay, like, back then I was like, I shouldn't be doing drugs. I shouldn't be getting fucked up all the time. Like, I got to take care of myself better. I didn't want to feel like shit all the time. And just trying to program those habits for yourself and your mind and your body is really, really hard.
Well, I
And
would even say for you it was probably even harder. And like that was like the perfect time to say. So I don't know if you know this, but between the ages of 0 and 7, you build every connection you're ever going to build in your brain. So whatever information
really,
you
no,
Yeah, so whatever information you took in from 0 to 7, that created your entire foundation. And then from 7 to 14, you built on it. And what sucks though, like, I always ask people, do you think PTSD is worse for adults or for children? And sometimes people will say adults, but it's actually worse for children because the adult, as long as it had good framework to fall back on, still had a good base. For a child who's experienced trauma, their whole foundation is shit. It is riddled with problems and just like nothing but venom. So they literally have to destruct an entire house and rebuild it from scratch. And what sucks is after all those connections are made, you actually have to go in there and forcefully make the new ones. They don't just like when you were 0 to 7, they just came. They're like, hey, cool connection, right? But no, now to create a new one, you have to work 20 times as hard to tell your brain to quit taking the path that it always knows.
oh yeah, yeah, and I didn't know that because I knew I just wanted better for myself, and honestly, the reason why I lived in that car for the year I did was because I knew my mom wasn't good. Like I could recognize if I'm around my mom, it's not gonna bring me anything but more pain,
Yeah.
and I have to get away. And this was me again, 18. I was young. My grandparents bought me this van. It was a fucking 2002 Dodge Caravan. It was an old ass car. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in it. I'm going to save up a bunch of money. But I still had problems. I was smoking all the time. I would probably smoke fucking 12, 13 cigarettes a day sometimes. I would go and get fucked up and do drugs and drink. And but I was like, okay, I just gotta save money. I gotta do this and I gotta do that and I gotta do this. And but I would recognize these habits that were slowly destroying me. And a lot of people that have these habits, at least for me, I didn't realize how bad they really were. Like I didn't realize how much of I was slowly self-destructing myself. And I had a good friend in New York named Alex, and he would tell me that, dude, you gotta take care of yourself, man. Like I'm worried about you. Like and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna get my shit together. And but yeah, that's the hardest part was for me was just making peace with all of it. It was just making peace with my mom. I feel like within only this last year or two, I finally have. But during that time, I was just fucking angry. I was angry at everyone. I was angry at the world. I was angry at her. And everything felt very unfair, you know? And everybody will, feels that way for sure in that moment. I'm sure you did back then too. Like shit just felt terrible and unfair to you. And so it's creating those habits, though, I think came from me. Like I really, like I would go online a lot and I would research just different ways to kind of learn how to dedicate yourself and cope with your pain and cope with different habits that you have, um, and trying to learn how to heal those bad habits. Um, so definitely the biggest scare I had was like I almost overdosed on drugs, and that was very hard for me to come back from. Um, and this was probably when I was probably about 22 or 23, and I was just kind of finally though just realizing that like I can overcome this, but it's hard. It was really really hard. It was painful, but I wanted better for my life. I genuinely just wanted something better. So I kept working hard. I kept just making music and meeting the right people along the way, and I owe a lot to having my grandparents, but in New York especially, just having good friends. I made some good friends and connections, and I also had to get rid of a lot of bad ones because there are some people I was associating with that were not people I should have been around at all, that they were causing those self-destructive behaviors, and they were very toxic people. Um, that's something too that's hard because if you one thing that was hard for me with my song Hate Yourself, the relationship I was in with the person that I was with, um she had a very very self-destructive family, and it caused a lot of her issues because her family was really into drugs and had some serious problems, and I always tried to relate to her to help her, um and we I helped her a lot in a lot of different ways, but there were some ways that you can't pick somebody else up completely, they have to do it for themselves. A lot of
Yeah.
people, she I felt like I in moments was taking care of her, and it's not that I didn't mind, but a lot of the problem stemmed that I felt like I was taking care of her and she wasn't actually helping herself.
Yeah.
And that gets really old in a relationship. It's hard to do that for somebody forever and ever and ever. Um, and she's doing well now, and I'm glad she is. But I don't think if I hadn't left her, that she would have changed. I felt like she could have just kept relying on me and relying on me.
And I think that's so important, and it's actually even really good that you realize that because a lot of times that is that factor that causes change, but also when you have two people who have struggled through a lot of their own pain, right? Coming together sometimes can be volatile. It can be very understanding, but sometimes very volatile because there's so many unhealed things in there that are causing you to become triggered and react instead of actually being able to think and respond. It causes those kind of behaviors. It's like, oh well, crap, I need to kind of get those behaviors out of me first. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that it's just beautifully empowering the storyline of how like the progression of change like in your story because statistically we wouldn't even think that a lot of times they say that we get stuck in a family cycle, right? And it's really hard to break that loop that we're growing up in. But even though it was hard as hell, and I can completely relate to you. There's two phases of me. There's the watch it all burn phase of me, and the I'm gonna heal the world version of me. And there's no middle, depending on how much pain I've taken in lately. I will swing back and it's gotten more stable now, but
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
important to realize that it's not all like love and light and happiness, and it's not the easiest thing to do. There's a lot of darkness in there, but that darkness itself can be beautiful, and it
yeah.
transforms us in ways that the injustice is that we shouldn't have had to have been transformed that way. But if we want to, we can make it something beautiful. Because I don't know if I would be the person I am that fights so hard against injustices. That's kind of what made me want to be a therapist, especially for people who had experienced childhood trauma, was to be able to point out the injustices, like where you were robbed, and like to make you realize, like, dude, you were robbed of your childhood. Like, it is okay to be angry that you were robbed of your childhood. It is okay to be angry that your life was at some point almost in some ways stolen from you. You had to teach yourself things on your own, and you coped and learned in the best way you knew how. But we get so hard on ourselves. We're like, I shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. But you didn't. You can't know what you didn't know. And
Mhm.
your brain is only so developed, and it's trying as hard as it can to understand, but there are just some things it doesn't know yet because it's not old enough to understand them yet. And so I think that that's beautiful, like just watching the progression of your story. And I also find it very beautiful and inspiring that I know that, you had mentioned that you were even a little nervous to come on here, but yet you've been so vulnerable and open. And I find that really even inspiring for myself. And I'm very curious to know, like, during those dark times and during all that, because you were essentially robbed of your childhood. Like, how did music help you really, like, how was it that shadow of that person in the dark for you?
It, I've always felt like that's my main struggle was, yeah, just dealing with myself and finding out how to. My worst enemy is me, and growing up through that, I always was growing up, and I realized I don't know if it's called perfect pitch. I don't know what you would call it, but I always had that. I could hear something, and I could just play it. I don't know how. That was just something I always had an ability of. So I would be at school, and they would have the piano, in the music room or the music classroom or somewhere in the cafeteria or something. And I would go in there, and I would hear maybe a song on the radio, and I would just pick it out, and I would start playing it. And I'd start playing it. And this was at a time, I didn't know how to write a song at all. I was just could hear something and translate it. And I know a couple of other musicians have that, like Charlie Puth does. He can just hear like music and just know exactly what it is. And so I had that ability because I was never like really good at sports or anything like that. Sports wasn't really a huge thing for me. I loved hockey. I could play hockey, but um, it was nothing I ever kept pursuing. And I think finding myself though in music was when I started writing songs. I wrote from a place of that abandonment, of that pain, of anytime I was depressed or I felt down or I felt whatever, I was just angry or sad or any of those emotions that I would feel, I would try to express it into a song. And some of them were good, some of them were really bad. I mean, I look at some of my oldest music now and I don't like it at all. But there's still some people that message me and they say, "Hey, I like," but like I have this old song called Mockingbird that's on my Spotify, and I wrote it in just like a total state of just complete depressed, didn't want to have anything to do with life. And I still get some messages from people that say they love that song. I can't listen to it though. Like because it's just like, to me, I don't like listening to it. But if it connects to somebody and resonates with them, that makes me happy. I feel like as an artist too, it's, for me at least, I'm my own worst critic. So when I hear myself back, it's a different perspective than to what somebody hears. Like listening or watching your own art. I'm even like that as a cosmetologist. And sometimes I gotta be like, okay, take a step back, because I always feel like I could have done a better job at a balayage, or I could have done a better job at this, or I could have done a better job at that, and or maybe I cut too much hair, or I should have left the bangs this way, or I should have left this way, or so I'm very much that perfectionist mentality with that, and sometimes that's a good thing, and other times that's a really bad thing. You get too far into your head about the littlest things that don't necessarily matter. Um, so I try to find balance with that as well. But music can heal. I mean, I remember the first time I heard like, again, old Linkin Park. And I was listening to Hybrid Theory and Meteora, and I was listening to those albums, and I was like, this shit's amazing. Like, because I was never like particularly always into rock. I listened to hip hop. I've listened to, like, even now as a producer, I've recorded country, I've recorded hip hop, I've recorded every genre,
Yeah.
and I always loved the fusion of music, of the different emotions. And back in the day, that's what my friends were listening to, and I just thought it was like the best shit. And then I eventually got into heavier music and heavier stuff. Um, but I was always taking in new music. Like lately, I've been listening to just Adele. I just keep listening to Adele right now.
Oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
know why I love her voice.
I'm sorry.
Like, yeah, I love Adele right now. That's all I've been listening to is like Adele, and so I love The Weeknd. Like, so it's not like I only will listen to metal or rock music or something, but I love all kinds of genres of music, and keeping your mind open to all of that. I feel like music in every form, shape, or way has a place. Um, and I think that's my producer mind, though. I'm not really for sure because I know some people, they just like don't like pop music. Another album I've been listening to is the new Sleep Token
Oh my
album. I
gosh.
don't know if you've heard of Sleep Token.
No, Chokehold
Yeah.
is my life song right now. Me and Chokehold are like,
Yes.
um, we're on our own phase of life right now, if that makes any sense. I always, say that you can tell a person a lot by what their theme song is, by what lyrics they're singing. So in Sleep Tokens, Chokehold has kind of been mine lately. But what's your theme song right now? If you had to give your
I've been listening. I've been listening to a lot of lately. It's been Adele, a lot of her older music,
okay,
and the new Sleep Token album though is really really good, and it's really well produced, and it's what I like out of music. It's unpredictable. It's
yeah.
all over the place. In the summoning, um,
Oh, it's
do
funny.
you wish that you loved? Like, there's so many great songs off of that album, and it's all such a fusion, a blend of hip hop to metal to rock to trap and all of it, and I love it. Like, that's kind of the direction I'm wanting to push my stuff into, of just trying to push the envelope of what can be done. Um,
I love
but
that.
that sort of, I feel like my, what were you saying?
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I was just saying that I feel like the new Sleep Token stuff has really, really impressed me.
Oh yeah.
Um, a lot of new music, but that's cool though that that you've listened to it though as well.
Oh yes, I love Sleep Token. Sleep Token and me are best friends right now. They just don't know it yet, but in my head and in my lyrics, like I um I I love how they break the brand, and I've almost heard you say it a couple of times, like even when you're talking about like Motionless and White and Bad Omens and like, and then like of course like Sleep Token. I think that there's a beauty that happens when music is no longer confined by genre and it's actually just allowed to be what is. And I think that that's the same thing almost with people. When we quit putting people into little bitty boxes and telling them who they have to be and what they have to be and how they have to be it and how they have to do it, some kind of beauty, like when we finally break the, like, you know what, I don't fit in a box and that's okay. Because, I had to realize that a long time ago I don't fit in any box, and that's why I felt outcasted was because I couldn't fit in a box. But even with music, right? Like there's something so creatively like just phenomenal that happens when an artist is like, you know what? Fuck it. How do I blend these together? Because I feel like for each time and space, each piece of music has its own audience to reach and its own part of healing. Like, how I was talking about, like at first, anger happens. That's the first step that's really important. Then the sadness comes because you realize this injustice happened. Then the anger kind of pikes back up a little bit because you're mad that you're sad, and then the injustice, then it goes back into the sadness, and then it actually goes kind of into this more loving free kind of feeling of music by the time you go around that cycle a couple of times, because each time I like to think of it like a fighting a dungeon boss, in a video game. Like at level
Mhm.
1 you can't fight a level 90 boss, and so each time you can only
Yeah,
fight the boss that you can fight, and you have to go back around and okay, cool, killed level 1, kill. And that's why I think sometimes people don't realize, they're like, why do I keep struggling this? And it's because there's for every time you get up a little bit, you can actually, now you've leveled up, you've geared up, you've armored up, and you can fight that bigger boss and take it down. And so I think
yeah,
that was beautiful how you were talking about that.
yeah, absolutely. And again, I'd always been into every kind of music, but I grew up, with the Warp Tour,
Oh yeah.
metal breakdown after breakdown, have, of Mice and Men,
Oh,
you know, burning, but just the heaviest of heaviest stuff too. So it's like I've gone through so many different phases of music and like of listening to all of these different artists, and I love the place where music is right now because I feel like again the new Motionless and White album's amazing too. There's so much there's so much ambition, and again, and like you said, we're not humans aren't just like one thing all the time. Like I can't just be angry all the time. I don't
yeah,
want to be feel angry all the time because I'm
yeah,
fucking angry. I want to express that in a song, or I want to listen to the music that gives me that energy and that feeling. But sometimes I'm just relaxed and I'm chill and I feel like in a good headspace, and so I listen to maybe some R&B, or I listen to Frank Ocean or The Weeknd. I listen to something that kind of zones me out, or Adele. And then other times I will listen to something that's in a bunch of different genres and perspectives of, because yeah, we're not one dimensional. And I love artists that aren't one dimensional. It's a good
yeah.
example of that is like a band I can't like I'm they're not bad, but I can't necessarily listen to them all. Oh, Breaking Benjamin.
Oh, okay.
Um Not that I don't like them. I think they make great music. I don't know if you've listened to a lot of Breaking Benjamin. But
Uh,
I every time I listen through a whole album of them, I feel like I'm always listening to the same thing.
that's fair.
And it doesn't really it doesn't really change too much. Um, and the songs I tend to like from those albums are the ones that are them doing something completely different, you know. But I've seen Breaking Benjamin many times, and I love Phobia. I think that's my favorite album from them. I love a lot of Dark Before Dawn. Like, they're still a great band, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but when it starts to feel a little too safe is when I don't feel like um, there's something new. Like there's not anything refreshing. There's not a new emotion. And that's why the Sleep Token album really surprised me, because I didn't know what to expect from that whole album. Or the new Bad Omens album. I mean, oh my God. The new Bad
Yes.
Omens album is it's just completely unreal. And like the stuff they're doing between R&B to electronics to just the heaviest stuff I've heard in a while, just and that's where I want to push my music to, into that direction. But I love where music is right now. I think it's in a really cool place, and we're breaking down those walls to what can be done. And I love that as a producer. I love trying to push myself. It's the same thing with what I do with cosmetology too, is I just love to push myself and try different things, and not always just be super safe with stuff. You just can't be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And kind of with that said, what would your advice be for viewers like that you wish you had have known sooner, that you've learned along the way that you really wish you had have known already?
The biggest thing I feel like for any new artists, because I get some message requests right now from artists telling me, "Hey, what are you doing? I love your music. You're getting popular now. What is it that you're doing?" And the thing I wish I had done back in the day was start social media and just promote and promote and promote. And I would say this for just anything in general. If you, even with what you're doing, you just got to keep posting and posting and posting and posting. You got to just keep going and keep going, because even my friend Lorenzo right now, I just featured on one of his songs. It released a couple of months ago. It's called Ink, and um, I recorded that before I left New York. But Lorenzo is incredibly talented. He's this awesome producer, and his band name is called The Fashion Show.
Oh, cool.
But he saw what I was doing on TikTok, and him and Justin were like, because I was just shit posting and shit posting. I was posting 3 times a day, the same thing. I wasn't even changing anything. I just kept posting, and I kept posting, and I kept posting. And they were like, "This is never going to work. Yeah, this is not going to work. Yeah, this is not going to work." Like they kept telling me that, Justin and Lorenzo. And no knock to them. I love them. And I still talk to them, and we're still the best of friends. But at the time, I was like, I mean, I got nothing to lose. I might as well just keep posting and see what happens. And now this has all happened, and now my music's doing really, really well. And once Lorenzo saw that it was working, then he was like, "Oh, okay, now I gotta hop on it, and I gotta just start posting and posting and posting." And now it's doing the same thing for him, and it's working, and he's getting fans, and he's getting attention, and he's getting popularity. TikTok's amazing, and I never utilized the internet with my music ever. I had never done it. And so, with any business, with what you're doing with your podcasts and your counseling, all of this stuff, the biggest advice is I can just give is like, do not stop social media. You make it a habit, make it a formula. If you have to, and what I did with the videos I recorded with my friends, with the white blood shirt, and me lip sync. What I ended up doing is we recorded like 120 drafts. We just spent an entire evening. We went out. We recorded 120 drafts that would last me a couple of weeks until we have to record more. But just spend a whole day, a whole evening, record 50 drafts, record anything, and just keep posting and posting and posting. Duet with people, do whatever you got to do. Because all it takes is like 1 or 2 videos to go semi-viral and do really well for you to have an audience and a fan base. It
Yeah.
it doesn't take a lot, but that you have to be persistent, because if I hadn't been persistent and kept posting and posting and posting this entire time, there's no way I would have the success I'm having right now.
So
Um, that's the biggest to a young musician though, is get on social media, even if you got one song. If you have one song and it's pretty good, it doesn't even have to be the best quality, but if it's a good song, just start posting it all the time, every day, and don't stop.
yeah, no, I love that advice. And I have a question for you too, like maybe even to further that, because I know that we've talked a little bit about you being an introvert and, kind of trying to stay hidden in some ways. How did you really push yourself outside of that box to be all like, because we've talked a little bit about how like you don't really like being in front of the camera and like, that's not quite things that you used to be comfortable with. So how did you push yourself, and maybe how could you even encourage viewers to push themselves like outside of that box to really go for it?
Um, it was hard for me because, um, well, part of the reason I never did the social media thing back then was because I have body dysmorphia. I don't know why I have body dysmorphia. Well, I think I know why. I used to be, when I was growing up as a little kid, I was really, really, really big. And I lost all that weight when I started becoming a teenager. But I think when it had happened, it, every time now when I look at myself in a mirror or I look at myself in the camera, I don't see what anybody else is necessarily seeing. And I can at least recognize that I have it. But when I look at myself though, and at the camera, or I hear myself talk back in any way, shape, or form, like one reason I have not talked in any of my TikToks or anything is because hearing myself back really, really just weirds me out, but also seeing myself, I don't see what anybody else is seeing. So a part of me overcoming that was really, it just boiled down to like I could let it defeat me, meaning like I could just be like, you know what, no, I can't do social media. I feel like I always look fucked up all the time and I look terrible all the time. And like I eventually broke down that wall and I was like, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I gotta just put myself out there. If I let that hold me, and if I let my body dysmorphia stop me and prevent me from getting my music out there, I will never know. I will never know if this can work or not. I will never know if I can have any success from my music. So it was more just like it's either this or it's not. And I decided that, fuck it. I remember when I first started posting, I would not look at any of those videos. Like if you
Yeah.
scroll all the way down to some of my beginning videos, I would not look at any of them. I would just post, not look at it, post, not look at it. I didn't look at any of them. I just decided not to because I knew if I did, I would delete them. And I deleted a couple because I would look at them and be like, man, and I would delete it and then I would delete it because I'm in my head so much. And it's hard because the world's so judgmental. People are fucking judgmental as fuck about everything, everyone. And not, and another, I guess the best way of putting it though is like, not everybody has to like you. Like, and I've had to learn that too. I've had some really, like, I've had messages sent to me that were death threats, like straight up people sending me, like, you fucking suck, your music sucks. If I will come after your family, I will, like, I've had some crazy shit sent to me. And, like, not everybody's gonna like you.
Yeah.
And some people like are so unbelievably miserable and unhappy with their own life that they are going to do everything they can to bully and tear you down. Like the bigger you get, the harder it gets because the more people tend to be after you. Um, the more people tend, like, I've never spoken in any of my TikToks. This is going to be like my first like ever video of me actually talking. Never spoken in any of my TikToks, and I've gotten comments of just, oh, fuck you, blah blah blah, all this crazy shit, like just people being belligerently mean for no reason. And I see it happen on the internet all the time, to not just me, but to other people too.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful, because you can either let those people get into your head. And when it started happening for me, it sure did. I was like freaking out, and I would stop posting. I would delete some videos. Again, I would get in my head and I'd be like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. But it's a funny saying though, and I think the thing that stopped me from worrying about it, which is, I'm not super religious or anything, but not everybody loved Jesus. Not everybody loved God. They obviously crucified Jesus to the cross, if that happened, right? Now, I don't know if
Yeah.
you're religious. If it did, whatever. I'm agnostic. I don't really know what is there or not, but I'm not against anything.
Yeah.
But the way I see it is, not everybody loved Jesus. And Jesus was supposedly this perfect miracle Messiah. And they still fucking crucified him on a cross. So that kind of broke I need to stop worrying about everybody liking me, and being worried about if everybody likes my music, or because at the end of the day they don't have to, and that's fine. You don't want to be friends with everybody. You don't want to be friendly with everybody, because if you are, you're ultimately going to be an enemy to yourself. Not
Yeah.
everybody is good for you. Those are the kind of people you don't want. If someone's going to leave you a horrendous, you don't want them in your fucking life. You don't want them to like you. You don't have to prove shit to them. You know? Sorry I keep cussing. I don't know how you post this, but
You're fine. No, you're fine. I generally cuss like a sailor, so you're fine.
yeah.
Um, because I believe that it should be more raw and authentic, and I think that so many things have a stigma that probably shouldn't. Like I think people don't realize that we ourselves assign good and bad to things,
Mm,
and I think it's actually important to even to go further in detail with what you said about Jesus, right? Is actually it was the people that was supposed to love him the most, the Pharisees, that crucified him, right?
yeah.
The ones that were
Yeah.
supposed to, they were the ones that should have seen him in all of his glory and all of his, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, like you were saying, like that should have been his people, right? But his own people were the ones that didn't see him. And like, and I think that's important because sometimes we don't even realize that there are snakes in our own like vicinity. That's sometimes when we have a good heart,
Yeah.
we overlook. I've learned, especially for myself, that I generally choose to see the best in people. And that gets me slapped quite
Mm,
often because when I look at them, because I want to believe at the bottom of my soul that they are good, genuine people. But then there's also this part of me that gets mad when I see them succeed that I'm like, really? I took the moral road and did it like step by step like I was supposed to. And they cheated and how did they get ahead? But I think that that's so
oh
important to
yeah.
people.
Yeah. No, I understand, and I've seen that happen too. Like, it's hard, and I think another thing that's helped me to really read people is because I am a bartender and a cosmetologist. You and I mean, I'm covered in tattoos. So some people, especially older generations, don't fuck with that at all sometimes. So people could come to the bar, they could be I'm reading people right off the bat too. And I try to be like you too, and I see the best in people, but I'm also very, very, very cautious of anybody at first. Even as a cosmetologist, I am personable and I talk to them and I'm friendly. But like the other day at my school, I was scheduled to do, this is really funny, but so I'm in Kansas right now, and Kansas is like, well, and you're from Texas, so you probably understand a little bit, but this is like Bible Belt, very conservative, very, and I'm from New York, you know. New York
Okay.
is all tattoos, it's liberal, it's very modern, I would say. And now I'm here and it's very, very conservative, very Christian. And again, I have no issue with that. It's not a big deal to me. It's just like my most of my family's that way. It's not a big deal. But you know, I had this old little lady I was scheduled to do a perm with. She had to probably be in her late 80s, and she
Mhm.
comes in this rocker. And as soon as I saw her, I knew she wasn't going to let me do her perm. Like, I just knew she was not going to do her perm because just based off of the way I looked.
Mhm.
And I went there and I introduced myself and I was just like, hi, I'm going to be doing your perm today. If you want to follow me, we can get you set up. And everything was being super friendly. And she looked at me and she was like, no, absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to let you do my perm. And she was upset because there wasn't anybody else available that day. And so she just left. And, but, you know, I tried to see the best in that situation and I tried, but like she looked at me like I was like a fucking criminal, like coming up to her and was like, which again, she's like this older lady. So when she sees someone like me that's just covered in tattoos, to her back in her time and in her day, in her generation, that was not normal. That was not really acceptable socially. So for her to see that and this guy comes up to her like, "Hi, I'm going to do your perm." If I don't necessarily blame her, like if I was in her shoes, I probably wouldn't let me do the perm for her either, you know? So I didn't take it personally or anything. It wasn't like, "Oh, she's just a blah 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 and judgmental." I didn't really see it that way. My teacher did. My teacher was really upset about it, but I was kind of like, I don't really blame her. Like, you know, so it's, but again, that's a situation of like, I kind of let it go and realize that, like, again, like, not everyone's gonna fuck with you. Not everyone's gonna like you. And that's
Yeah.
okay. That's, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm that same way as a server or bartending. And I'm always usually incredibly well with people and good with people. But you know, as that job goes, I don't know if you've ever done anything like that, but you're walking up to strangers. You're talking to a stranger. You've never don't know who they are, don't know anything about them, and you're serving them, you're making them drinks, you're bringing them food. You have no idea who these people are. Um, so I think one reason I've still, even as an introverted person, have been able to be good in the field I'm working in as a cosmetologist is because since I stuck to serving and bartending, it still has made me very, very good with people and rating people, if that makes sense. Because you're just
Yeah.
interacting with strangers all day in and day out, you know?
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And I actually I used to work at the hospital. And so I used to have to wake random people up in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of the night, and man, they hated me. But what was nice about the hospital is my legs are covered in tattoos, and one of my arms is. But I could hide them. But generally speaking, like even as a therapist, I have had people that have been like, "Oh, I don't," because I do have bright red hair, I have sharp nails, I'm covered in. I don't look like a typical therapist, and I've had
Mm-hmm.
some of the older generation that are like, yeah, I don't think that that's for me. But I've actually learned to appreciate that because you just saved me a headache. Because I don't, what I
Oh,
mean
really?
by that, I don't now have to sit in here and explain myself and try to. I mean, I could sit there and fight for you to see me for who I am and to realize I'm a great therapist. But sometimes when people are determined to misunderstand you, it doesn't matter what you say. Because they are so determined, they're going to see what they want. They are determined to misunderstand you. And if you're that determined to misunderstand me, then I have to choose my own peace at that point. Because when it comes to, because I used to be kind of worried about my tattoos and stuff, But for my teens and like younger, my younger people, they actually love that about me because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I came in here to you and you seem like a real person." Instead of like somebody that's just sitting there behind a checkboard. Like, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? I do therapy
Mm-hmm.
by throwing myself under the bus like all day because I'm like, I want them to like, because I've learned that if I throw myself under the bus, then it opens up this gate for them to be like, hey, oh, well, then maybe you understand me when I tell you this that I wouldn't have told you if I thought you were fixing to judge me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it opens up that vulnerability that wouldn't have happened. And so for me, I've just kind of gotten to where I take it as kind of like you saved me time trying to weed out things in my life that weren't serving me. Because what's wonderful is that you just weren't for me. I wish you the
Yeah.
best. I hope that you find who was for you, but that also means that you didn't take a space for somebody that was for me. Because if that client did get on my roster and I wasn't able to help them, that would have taken up the space of a client that could have really used me, you know,
Yeah.
and I could have actually helped.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You're right. And that did take me time to kind of figure out because growing up I was already really heavily tattooed at 18, 19. And so, and if people looked at me funny, I would fucking be like, yo, fuck you, fucking do some shit. Like, I'd be mean, and I would, but now it's kind of like, like I had said and you had said there, it's just not everybody's gonna like you, regardless if you wouldn't have tattoos or not, right? Like,
Exactly.
not even if you were just, so it's like some people will just not jive with you. They didn't with me, whether I had tattoos or didn't, or some people or not. Like, it is it it's, and that's okay. You can't be friends with everybody. You can't have everyone like you. You don't want to. You don't want that. Like, you
Yeah.
don't want that older judged you for your tattoos and shit to be your client, like you said, because you
Yeah.
could fill that spot that actually fucks with you, and you can be an asset to them in their life and helping them. Where that old
Yeah.
lady's just gonna be like, oh, what do you know? Like, you got tattoos, or you're this that way, you have red hair, and your nails are black, or whatever. Just being judgmental as hell. Um, you, you don't want anybody like that in your business. I treat that same way with cosmetology. Like I said, I never felt bad about taking that perm for that older lady. She
Yeah.
was just not, it wasn't my client. She
Exactly.
just wasn't for me. And like, I'm not trying to win over people to let me do their hair. I'm just not. Like, you either trust me and you look at my work and you like it, or you don't. Or if we vibe with each other, then we do or we don't. But if I don't vibe with you, I'm not going to have you as my client. I'm just not. Um, so, like, all of those things are crucial and important to me. So, and I had to learn that from serving and bartending because, again, when you're coming up to strangers, like, I remember when I first started serving at Red Lobster, you go up to some random person and they just treat you like dog shit the entire time. They tip you nothing and they walk out, get their food and they leave, barely say a word to you, or mean for no reason. Um, and at first, and back then, that would really bother me because I would be like, well, what the hell did I do that person? Or why didn't they like me? Or why didn't it? And now I've realized it's like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it just doesn't. Like, even with me now doing bartending and serving, it's like, you don't have to like me. You're here, like, be here, don't be here. I don't need your money if you don't want to tip me. It's like, so that's helped me a lot though, to realize that it's okay. And for your circumstance especially, like, that's okay. And not everybody's gonna be like, oh, you're a great therapist. Some people will be like, oh, you're a bad therapist. this, or I don't like your
Yeah,
work, or I don't like your advice towards me. I'm sure, like, I've given people advice before and they think I'm stupid, you know? So everyone's different. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, I'm glad that advice had helped you. It's helped me certainly, because I'm interacting with so many random people all the time, every day, that I've never met. And and if I was wrapped up in about every single random stranger I meet, or online with the hate I get or the comments I get, if I was wrapped up in all of that, I would be dead. Like, that would destroy me. You can't be wrapped up in that. It will tear you apart. Um, a
I
lot
think,
of big musicians have trouble with that, though, too.
yeah, I think what helped me the most and like that I try to teach my clients is that when people treat you that way, it's really a reflection of how they see themselves. They're not actually treating you that way. Like,
Yeah,
for instance, if I
yeah,
don't think I can succeed, why would I be encouraging to you succeeding? Or if I feel like shit about myself,
mm,
then I'm gonna misery loves company. And actually, believe it or not, I don't even think that they purposefully do it sometimes. Actually, sometimes I think they're protecting you. Like, oh no, don't try that because you're gonna fail. And so they're trying to stop you essentially from experiencing this failure, right? Because they themselves are afraid to try anything because they feel like they're gonna fail. And so I don't always
yeah,
think people do it intentionally, but we don't realize like how much we actually project like parts of ourselves. And after, really like studying with that in myself, I stopped taking things so personally because I was like,
mm,
okay, like I don't know what's going on in your life right now. We can't be in the same room. I can still send you love from a different room. Like we can't be in the same space right now because I'm not going to accept you to treat me this way. However, though, I do understand at the same token that I don't have to now absorb that into me and feel like it's something I have to fix. Like sometimes, don't get me wrong, like I do bad things and like I have to fix my own behaviors and things like that. But there are times like that's somebody else's stuff that they're trying to project onto you that we shouldn't necessarily take. And we have a choice. Like when they try to hand you that rock or whatever, are you going to take it? And if we take it, we
yeah,
absorb it into our soul. And if we would be more aware of the fact that we actually do have a conscious choice on whether or not we're going to accept somebody's opinion. Because what sucks is the funny thing is we don't actually care about what other people tell us. We only care about what we tell ourselves. What I mean by that is like, have you ever noticed that people can say mean things to you and half of them don't even stick, but then they'll say that one thing that you're insecure about and that one sticks, you know?
oh yeah,
And the reason is because
definitely.
you've told yourself 1,000 times that that thing is bad about you. So actually, you weren't listening to them at all. You were only listening for their confirmation. Because the funny thing is like for
Mm-hmm.
me, like if somebody were to call me weak, right? I'd be like, sweetheart, no. Like I've been through things you can't fathom. That's not a place you could hurt me at. But if somebody were to call me stupid, you'd take me back for a second, and I'd be like, because I am insecure about the fact that my high school education was spotty. And even though I have a master's, almost doctorate now, it's still like, I'm like, was that a fluke? Like, even though I know it wasn't, but that's what that parasite of our mind will tell us sometimes is that like, it's not like, it'll make us discredit ourselves for the hard work that we've done. And, and I guess the thing is that what we actually tell ourselves is what we look for confirmation. It's kind of like, for instance, if I want to confirm that I'm stupid, I can. If I want to confirm that I'm smart, I can. For instance, I could get 100 A's and one F. But if I want to confirm I'm dumb, that one F will confirm it. But if I want to confirm I'm smart, those 100 A's will confirm it, and that one F would have been the fluke. So it actually depends on how
Mm-hmm.
I'm determined to see it. And that's why I say if somebody's like almost bound, damned, and determined to misunderstand you, they're going to. Because they are going to see
Yeah,
the misinformation that they want to see at all times.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great advice too. Is Yeah, it clicked for me. I had to, because again, all of the random hate I would get on TikTok and all these death threats and comments and crazy shit I would see sent to me. If I was letting it all take personally, again, it would destroy me. And it's, and you just can't. You just can't. And you're right too about the thing that makes you the most insecure, that people will poke at, and people will say something that you are insecure about, um, for sure will get you a lot more than just the off kilter thing that somebody says, like, um, but I feel like what's really just has honed me in was realizing these things. I was listening to a podcast, and I think Mike Tyson had said all of this too. Like, he had said that, like, you can't be friends with everyone, because if you are, you're an enemy to yourself. And I took that, and I was like, he's right, because that was when shit was like really hard for me to deal with, and I was seeing all these hate comments, and I was seeing people just slamming me and being like, oh, your music sucks, or you look stupid, and you're blah blah blah, all this terrible shit, that I put a lot of myself into this music, and for someone to say it's bad sucks to hear, whether it's actually that or not. So when I would listen to this stuff, and went on these podcasts, and a lot of that was me searching for those answers as well. But no, I agree. It's, and in your position, I can definitely relate to a lot about being a therapist, in the sense of, like, yeah, cosmetology, I mean, is you're with me, like you said, you've told your hairdresser everything.
My hairdresser knows
And they
my
know,
life.
yeah, but it I feel like because of that experience, like, you're closer to them, and it's a that's kind of why I've always loved cosmetology and barbering, is because just there's something about going to somebody, and you're almost transforming into a new version of yourself, if that makes sense. Like, you're kind of changing yourself to feel good, and you can kind of confide, and you can talk. And I've never liked a barber or a hairstylist that wasn't personable. I don't really understand that. I think you need to be able to talk to your clients, and you're doing their hair. You don't want to mess up their hair. You need to talk to them. You need to ask them how they're doing. You need to ask what they like, but you also need to ask, if they want to tell you. Now, some people don't, like, at the school, I have this one guy, like, I remember, he's an older guy. He used to be a principal. He's retired now. He's about 76 or something like that. And his name is Glenn. And he gets like a disconnected hard undercut. It's really funny, but he's got it slicked back. He looks like a greaser, and he's like in his 80s. And but he had been in Vietnam. He was a retired principal. And I remember, like, my first 3 or 4 times I had him at the school, he would barely like talk to me very much. I would try to make some conversation, just make sure his hair is okay and the way he likes it. He's like, yeah. He's like, I like it. It looks really good. Like, you're doing a good job, and I was like, okay. And, like, then the next couple of times he's come into me throughout the year, he's opened up to me more and more and more. And we would talk about him going to Vietnam, and then him coming back to go into teaching and becoming a principal. And it's funny because he was like, oh yeah, I hated being a principal, and he'll talk to me about that. So I'm learning a lot about him and his life. And then one day he was like, hey, do you want to go out to dinner with me, like, on Friday, like, just at the end of the week? And I was kind of like put off by that, because he was never really a super open guy. And I was
Yeah.
like, I mean, I guess, I mean, if you want. Um, so I was nervous, but I went out to eat with him, and went out to this Mexican restaurant, and we were talking and stuff. And again, I just cut this guy's hair at the school. I didn't really, he's been going there for the last 25, 30 years of his life, since he's been retired. And we got to talking, and he was asking me about me growing up in New York, and everything I've told you, I told him. But he apparently had a son that he had passed away, and he said that I reminded him a lot of his son. So he had a kid, and he had passed away in a car accident. But ever since then, like, he's always coming to the school. I did a pedicure on him last time and a haircut. He's coming back in a couple weeks, gonna do his hair again. Um, but I connect to him, and he connects to me. We have like a really good just chemistry, and he had told me, is like, I think after you're done with school, I'll follow you to where you go. And I was like, well, I appreciate that, man. Like, he's a great guy. Um, but stuff like that makes your day, you know. And I'm sure for you, talking to people and helping people that you've been seeing, and you can connect to them and really give them advice, and help them with their life, makes a huge difference for you too. And it makes you feel good that you feel like you are helping somebody.
Yeah.
Um, in that moment, I felt like I did for him, you know.
Yeah. No, I can't even imagine how much you helped him and in that time. Like that's just and by the way too, I think that that shows too just how good of a soul you have to have even, you know, you're like, yeah, sure, I'll do this with you, but then to realize like it was like because his son had passed away, like I think that that is so beautiful and that speaks so much about your heart. And then even as he was talking about following you, I've always been a firm believer that if somebody is going to follow me, I want it to be because they know who I am. Like I've always, you know, if people are going to follow me, then let me be a person worth following. And what I mean by that is like just because my heart and my soul will speak louder than maybe some of the misinformation or the other people around you that aren't being as authentic because people love to wear a lot of masks. And I think that when they actually come across people who are showing and bearing their heart, at first it's a little bit of a take back because people are so used to seeing masks all the time that when they see somebody that's raw and authentic, it does give them that second of like, wait, what just happened? Like, is this safe? And so I think that that's beautiful because like you're even helping people remove those masks. And I just wanted to ask you like because I want to be conscientious of your time before we go, is there anything else you want to let everybody know?
Um, I I have new music on the way. I'm gonna be posting this to my TikTok and on my Snapchat and stuff like that. Once you get it uploaded and everything, of course. But definitely to my fans, I appreciate everybody supporting me. Um, and I've had a lot of people reach out wanting to get to know me more, and I feel like this would be the best kind of video to just really see who I am and the position of life I am in right now. And but I appreciate talking to you and learning about you as well. You seem like an incredible person, and you know, I love what you're doing. I think you need to keep doing it and just keep going. Um, but and that's why I decided I think this was like the best way of going about doing an interview for me, and just like, you know, finally expressing myself, because I've been asked many other times to do interviews, but I'd always like look at the stuff and I was kind of like, I don't really know, you know. But I appreciate having me on, and maybe sometime in the future, to where end up I going or something, we could do it again and have another podcast video. And but yeah, no, I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I actually appreciate you too. And actually, because I remember your first message was kind of like, "Oh, don't take any offense to it if I don't do it." And I was like, "Oh no, of course, like not at all." And then when you responded it back, like my heart melted because like I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it meant a lot to me because you know sometimes I'm used to people not seeing me or seeing like my heart of what I'm trying to do, and so it was kind of that comforting feeling like that was like, okay, like my heart is showing that that's what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? And so like it made my night when you were like, "Oh yes, I'll do it." So I from the bottom of my soul, I appreciate you and thank you so much for taking a chance with me and then just for coming on here. I appreciate that so much.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, So, like I said, we can do it again sometime in the future. And but no, I think a lot of people want interviews because they want the attention. You know what I mean? Like they don't really care about what I'm doing. They just want the attention. They just want an artist to bring them people to them. You know what I mean? Like but they don't care about the artist, or they don't care about any of this. None of the conversation. So, but I appreciate having me on. So thank you very much. It was a good talk. We went on for almost 2 hours. So
We
what?
did,
It's
and
an hour and 40 minutes. Yeah.
yeah, no, I appreciate you, and it was a good talk, and I feel like there was so much too, like there was just so much important information in there. That's why I was like, I've always been one of those people that believed that you should just be in the moment instead of worrying about like different things, right? Because I feel like sometimes, like if you're like, oh, well, it has to be this long, or it has to do this, or whatever, like we limit ourselves by the beauty that could actually form if you just like are there, if that makes sense. And crazily enough, I do that with my clients too. My clients know that I'm often running late to my next session, but they don't care because of the fact that they know that they're also afforded the same benefit, that if they need me for extra time, I'm there. Like, I'm not going to send a
Yeah.
client out there crying. Like, I don't want you coming to therapy and then having to go face the day. Like to me, my therapy is my loyalty. And I'm like, I know I'm banding with you. Like, I'm not sending you out there a mess. And the other clients, since they know it, they're like, it's worth, you know what I mean? So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing of you for sure. So, but yeah, thank you again for having me on. It was a good conversation. And like I said, I'm going to be posting it to my platforms as well, and I hope it does bring you some attention. But just keep going, keep keep messaging people, whether they get back to you or not. You know.
thank you. I appreciate you. And
Cool.
also, too, can you stay on for a few minutes too? Because it's got to upload.